Welcome to part 55 of Was I in a Cult? Quick recap. In the last episode, I was talking about how I caught my grandmother in my drawer when I came home from hanging out with Cynthia. I confronted her, I asked her what she was doing in my things, and she said she was looking for my medical card. I was like, why are you in my stuff? I mean, if you want to know where my card is, why don't you ask me? Long story short, I was mad. I was getting ready to leave the house and I was just pissed off. I wanted to blow off steam. And she got in front of me, stood in my way, and said, "You're not going anywhere." Meanwhile, my grandpa's in the other room calling the cops, telling the cops that I could possibly be on drugs and that I may be getting violent with my grandmother. So the cops show up, tell me that I need to go with them. I tried to convince the police it was just a big misunderstanding and that it was my grandmother that was holding her fists up to me and blocking me from leaving the house just to go to Starbucks. Of course, it was their word against mine. And there was a little thing that happened a few days before that probably made the police believe my grandparents a little bit more than me. So what had happened is that Cynthia and I were walking along in a shopping center on the way to her mom's house, and we were not doing anything wrong. We were literally just walking. But Cynthia had a past, and she had been pulled over by the police before. So, I mean, there was a possibility that that would happen, but I didn't think that there was any reason for us to be pulled over because we weren't doing anything but walking. Prior to them pulling us over, I was freezing, and Cynthia let me wear her jacket, and she was like, "Oh shoot, wait, I gotta get my needle out of there." And I'm like, "Don't worry about it, it's just a needle, it's no big deal, right?" And like, she didn't have drugs in the pocket or anything like that, just a needle and or syringe, whatever you want to call it. So we get pulled over and the police decide that they're gonna search us, and I'm like, "For what? We're not doing anything, we're walking." And then, I mean, she just started searching us and stuff like that, and she found the syringe in the pocket of the jacket I was wearing, and then Cynthia was telling the police, "That's not her jacket, it's my jacket, I let her wear it." But they took me in anyways, and they took her in, and we both went to the police station for nothing. We did nothing. We had done nothing wrong. So I get stuck in this holding cell for like 2 or 3 hours for no reason, just because I'm wearing a jacket that has a freaking syringe in it. No drugs, nothing. So I get cited out. But I guess Cynthia got kept for whatever reason. I don't even know why, but they put her in jail. So of course, when my grandparents called and said I might be on drugs, they thought, yeah, we just arrested her a couple days ago and cited her out for having a syringe. So yeah, they're gonna believe my grandparents. It was literally being at the wrong place at the wrong time. It was just what happened. At that point in time, I was just like, man, like, yo, the devil just like setting me up left and right to just get in trouble for no reason. And I'm thinking that because I come from a church that talks about demonic attacks, and so I'm thinking I'm being oppressed by the enemy. And then at the same time, I'm thinking, oh, it's because I opened a door, because I'm now backslidden and I left the church and now I'm being punished for this, and this is like my punishment. Which is what every cult would want you to believe. Because every cult just wants you to come back to them. And so they want you to believe that if you leave, bad things are going to happen. So I had just left the church and this was like a bad thing happening. So I automatically assumed, because of what I learned in church, that it was bad things happening because I left the church. Okay, let me clarify this one more time, just so you know. I was never on drugs. I wasn't using heroin, and yes, I know it looked bad because I was hanging out with someone who did, but I was trying to help her. I was trying to basically get her saved so that she would get clean and sober. That's that was my goal and my intent. I know now that that's just codependency and that you can't fix anyone, that someone has to really want it for themselves. But at the time, I was young and naive. And I believed in my church and in God, that God could deliver anyone at any time from anything. And I still believe that. I still believe that there is a God, but I just don't believe that the church cult operated in a way that actually helped drug addicts. Also, to let you know, my grandparents came from the era where being a lesbian, being queer in any way, was considered a mental illness. That was in the diagnostic manual for mental illness back in the days when my grandparents were learning about that type of stuff. So that didn't go away when it was removed. That mentality that my grandparents had didn't go away when that was removed from the manual. And my grandparents thought that homosexuality was deviant behavior and that it needed to be fixed. And that was another reason they wanted to lock me up. I do remember at some point in time when I was still heavily medicated by the medication that I was given from the drug rehab, I tried to, I think vaguely I remember that I tried to talk to my grandparents about being gay. They had found out that I was hanging around with this woman that was a lesbian, and they didn't take that very well. And I remember one time I went to the store with my grandma and I wanted to get some jeans, but I wanted to get some men's jeans. And it had nothing to do with being queer. But she said to me, "You're not gay. I'm not buying you men's clothing." I said, "Well, I was pretty gay last night." She said, "You don't know what you're talking about." She yelled at me and said, "You're not a lesbian." I think that's one of the reasons why she was looking for my medical card. Little did she know that those places that she was trying to put me in were actually trying to help me accept myself for who I was as a queer person. One time my grandmother asked me who I was hanging around with, and I think I had told her that I was with Cynthia now. And I remember her saying, "Oh, okay, so you were hanging out with Cynthia." And I was like, "No, I'm with Cynthia now." Like, as in, we are together. We are girlfriend and girlfriend. She's like, "You don't know what you're talking about." So I remember when they put me back in that drug rehab unit, I had to go to group. So there was, again, more AA meetings and NA meetings that I had to attend. So I think I went to one, and I was talking about how that I was there because my grandparents really didn't agree with the fact that I was queer, and they wanted me to change that aspect of my life, and they didn't want me to be a lesbian anymore. I honestly don't know if it was more about that or more about my grandparents thinking I was on drugs, because I wasn't on drugs, but they definitely didn't want me to be a lesbian. So they thought that if they sent me to this rehab, that I could just be fixed all around, I guess. Because honestly, when they were looking for my medical card, it was right after they found out that I was queer. I really don't think that they thought I was using drugs. So from that point forward, I knew that I had to hide the fact that I was queer, or else my grandparents were going to lock me up again. They had this whole, like, intervention with the people at church with me about how being gay was wrong and a sin. And then I kind of recommitted to Christ and decided to try to stop being queer. I mean, because of everything that had happened, I was actually scared and thinking that all these bad things were happening because I was queer. So then I was begging God to forgive me and everyone else. And since Cynthia was in jail, there was no one else that was going to be there for me. So I went back to church. And I also went back to work after being gone for 2 weeks or 3. Fully medicated again at that point. At a time, bye.